Um, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. I'm Matt Cave, Deputy Director of the Center and a leader of the Translational Research Service Corps, or TRSC. I'd like to thank uh, really everybody on the call that was so instrumental in the successful, resubmission of the P30 application last week, and especially Luis and Sarah, who worked so hard um, on it, and Colleen as well. So just as a reminder, the CIEHS, or Center for Integrative Environmental Health Sciences, is a NIEHS funded core facility research center. And so it provides core services as well as pilot project and research voucher money, which we deliver through the core utilization subsidy program. There are several cores within the center. There's the BIFC, which does the biostatistics, and then there's the essentially omics core, which is the OEFC. And then the other core that provides research services is the TRSC, or the Translational Research Support Corps. And so I'd like to thank Kira Taylor for presenting today on this TRSC seminar series. So TRSC supports 4 areas of research. It supports basic science research, epidemiology, and population health services research, which is what Dr. Taylor is going to be talking about today. And it supports GIS research, and pleased to see DJ Biddle on the call. And it also supports human subjects research. And each of those areas has one, or maybe in some cases 2 leaders. And so, for example, the human subjects research, clinical research anyway, not that epidemiologists don't do human subjects research. The clinical research is led by Jai Ping for the adult studies, and then Jan Sullivan for the pediatric studies. And so just by way of reminder, the TRSC seminar series, we've just been kind of going through the list of each of our leaders in each of the areas. And so Kira is the leader of the epidemiology and population health services support area of the TRSC. So Kira and I have known each other a long time, even since undergraduate days, and she's since then received training at all of the top places. It's just amazing where she's been and all the different things that she's done, and been involved with a number of really important studies, both of national and also local significance, including reproductive health studies related to protest and tear gas exposures. She became involved with the TRSC several years ago, and has really been a great resource. And public health has a lot of momentum in the school, and this is, I think, one area of the CIEHS that we could really expand in the future as our population health research and epidemiology research. And so that's kind of the overarching purpose of these TRSC seminars, is to expose the members of the center to various resources that are available in these distinct areas, and encourage you to pursue research in them. So Dr. Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share with you everything I can tell you about both the School of Public Health and Information Sciences and the kind of work that we do there, in case you don't really know. And I'll also focus in on research that's going on in each of the departments. So where do we fit in the TRSC? We do population health research. Of course, we use geographic information sciences as well. But what I'm going to focus on today is really population-based health research. This is the mission and vision of the School of Public Health. So we're really all about education, research, community engagement, policy, and practice, all of the above. So different faculty in the school focus on different areas here. But if you are interested in learning more about one of these, let me know and I'll get you in touch with the right person. So our faculty in the school have expertise in designing, conducting, analyzing data, and communicating observational population-based research. So I'm going to focus really on observational research today, as opposed to clinical research or clinical trials. So when we think about CIEHS, we think about the environment. How does the environment affect health? Typically, we address this, at least in epidemiology, using observational studies, because we are typically researching exposures that are harmful to us, like pollution, VOCs, heavy metals, etc. And clinical trials for these kinds of exposures is not ethical or feasible. And we do have many investigators in the school conducting population-based research on environmental exposures. Some have designed and are conducting their own studies as PI or co-PI. Some are using data that's been previously collected and stored in large databases, which are either publicly available or available by application. So if you're more used to the clinical trial world, you may not be aware of, maybe you're aware of, but maybe you don't know the nitty-gritty details about special considerations that you need to think about for observational studies. So when we conduct an observational study, looking at the effect of a harmful environmental exposure on a health-related outcome, we have to think about the validity of our findings. So the main threats to validity are selection bias, which looks different for different kinds of study design. Like case control study has very different problems with selection bias than, say, a cohort study. And selection bias occurs by definition when the probability of inclusion into the study or retention in the study, if it's a prospective study, is associated with both the exposure that you're looking at and also the health outcome of interest. We also have to worry about information bias, like misclassification of data, so just how valid are your data, and confounding, which, loosely stated is a mixing of effects. So as epidemiologists, we really try to think very carefully and in an educated fashion about how best to design your study with these threats to validity in mind, because they can all cause bias, either towards the null or away from the null. We would like to be able to minimize these biases at the study design stage. And you can also reduce some bias in the analysis stage with proper analytic methods. And one question that we like to think about is, do you just want to be able to predict the outcome with certain predictive factors, or are you more interested in studying why? Like, what is the etiology of the outcome? And what I'm doing right now is kind of highlighting the expertise that epidemiologists can bring to a research group that might be unique, that maybe someone who is experimental researcher, maybe working in the lab with cells or animals, or maybe someone that's only ever done clinical trials, may not have such a strong grasp on. So you can use epidemiologic methods to examine effect modification, which is just interaction. Is the effect of X on Y different depending on the value of Z? For example, is the effect of VOC exposure on endothelial function modified by factors like sex, age, race, or possibly genotypes, socioeconomic status? Effect modification is not a bias, so it's distinct from confounding. And effect modification is interesting, whereas confounding is a nuisance and it is a bias. Another thing that we like to look at is mediation. So in a causal pathway, you can look at mediation. You can test whether the effect of X on Y is mediated by some intermediate factor M, and if so, how much of it is mediated by M. And so there are sophisticated methods to examine mediation. It's best examined in longitudinal studies where you have different time points of X, M, and Y. And our department, we have some people with expertise in causal inference. So using causal inference methods, what can and what cannot be inferred from your results, and also, how can you best design a study so that causal inference is possible. So I hope you'll think of faculty in the School of Public Health, including the epidemiologists that we have here in our department, as co-investigators. We can help with study design for observational research. We can help you decide what study design would be most appropriate for the hypothesis you want to test and the resources that you may have available. So this shows you sort of the hierarchy of epidemiologic study designs, from the least amount of causal inference you can make on the bottom with case reports. I don't even count that as epidemiology. And then the very top would be randomized clinical studies, which is not experimental. But in the middle, we have these observational studies. The lowest bar for an observational population-based study is an ecological study, where you don't have any individual level data. You just have data on groups of people, and you have summary measures. And then up from that would be a cross-sectional study, which you don't have temporality because you're measuring everything at the same time. Like, you don't know if the exposure actually preceded the disease, but it does have this benefit of it is actually the best study design for measuring prevalence of something at any particular point in time. Above the cross-sectional study, we've got a case control study, which is very efficient. It doesn't take too long to conduct compared to a cohort study. But temporality is sometimes difficult to determine. Like, are we really sure that the exposure actually came before the disease? Especially, that's really difficult if you have a chronic disease. A retrospective cohort study uses pre-existing data, but looks at it in a longitudinal fashion. So it is more efficient than, say, a prospective cohort study, but you are relying on previously collected data, so you can't really tailor the study to what you would want to measure. And finally, a gold standard is the prospective cohort study that you design. You design how you're going to measure the exposure, the outcome, you know what covariates you're going to collect, and you collect everything over time so that you can pretty much be sure that the exposure precedes the outcome. So epidemiologists can help you to refine your hypotheses and your specific aims, especially if you are going, you're going to be dealing with a review panel of epidemiologists or other population health researchers. This might be particularly helpful for you if your background is more in experimental research. We can help you figure out how to design and implement your study, including, this is just some examples, sampling techniques for selecting participants, appropriate survey methods, and how to make sure your survey is valid and reliable, appropriate statistical analysis for causal inference, how to best reduce bias at the design stage and at the analysis stage, how to contextualize your results when you look at the larger body of literature and you're trying to compare the quality of epidemiologic studies across the literature, how to discuss the internal and external validity of your study, and of course, dealing with the IRB, writing the IRB application. Okay, so backing up to talk more about the whole School of Public Health and Information Sciences. Right now, there are 4 departments: bioinformatics and biostatistics, epidemiology and population health, health management and systems science, and health promotion and behavioral sciences. If we think about the Department of Bioinformatics and Biostatistics, Dr. Mein Kong did give a presentation to the TRSC highlighting the biostatistics and bioinformatics core already. But this is just some of the databases and resources that she highlighted in her presentation that I wanted to remind everyone of their existence. So there's the big Cerner electronic health record database with hundreds of thousands of people in it. There's the EPIC database. U of L Health is working on creating an electronic data warehouse. There are projects with SEER, NHANES. We do have access to some NHANES data that was recently pulled down by the feds. We have data from the Kentucky hospitals, the HCUP data, and we also can help with, or they can help with study design analysis, power calculations, and especially analyzing big data, omics data, putting your data into REDCap or conducting surveys with REDCap. So there's the link to request their services. In my department, epidemiology and population health, in terms of health outcomes that we specialize in, we have substantive expertise in cancer epi. Several of our faculty have studied different kinds of cancers, reproductive epidemiology, global maternal child health, genetic epidemiology, cardiovascular disease, infectious disease. Dr. Ali works closely with the Department of Infectious Diseases, nutrition, social and behavioral epi, and survey methods. Nick Piper is really good with survey methods. He's doing a study right now he works for the Eating Disorders Lab doing ecological momentary assessments where he gets data on participants several times a day, people who have eating disorders, and he can make this kind of ideographic diagram looking at the effect of eating disorder behaviors on other outcomes within individuals and also on an aggregate level. So that's kind of a cool method I learned about. Causal inference and mediation analysis, Dr. Dupre is very good at that stuff. Environmental epidemiology, Dr. Gwen Dupre, myself, and Dr. Zhang all work in the general field of environmental epi. And we also have some former students who are now at the Environment Institute, including Ray Yeager, Dan Riggs, and Clara Sears. So Dr. Dupre, she focuses on cancer and environmental exposures that cause cancer, specifically heavy metals, but she's also looked at other things like radon, air pollution, noise, and SES. And in addition to cancer, she's also studied other outcomes such as COVID-19, Hep A, opioid overdoses, and behavioral health. And she, of course, is part of the CIEHS. One of her studies that she's PI of is called the Louisville Environmental Assessments Pilot Study in Colorectal Cancer. This is a clinical case control study of colorectal cancer. And the exposure of interest for this study is heavy metals in blood and urine. And the participants also fill out a questionnaire. And the study is in progress. She didn't want me to share any results today, but just to make everyone aware of the study. I also wanted to highlight research by Dr. Chenwei Zhang. He's got a lab. He's a laboratory scientist. Not all of us do over in this school. He's also an environmental epidemiologist, and he likes to conduct mechanistic studies. So he has looked at pulmonary toxic, genotoxic, and carcinogenic effects induced by exposure to different environmental and occupational hazards like nanoparticles, cigarette smoke, etc. And he invites collaborations on those areas. Dr. Stephanie Boone is the PI for Kentucky for the rural cohort study. This is a big study, and it's occurring in 4 states, or they're recruiting participants from 4 states, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Kentucky, mostly in rural areas in these states, looking at health outcomes and exposures, specifically in rural populations. So I wanted to bring this up and highlight it because you can apply to conduct an ancillary study with the rural study, either analyzing data that they've collected or proposing to collect additional data on the participants that they already have. So there's links here to apply for an ancillary study. Just some more information about the rural study. The target enrollment is 4,600. They already have over 3,000 people enrolled. And the goal is to bridge the rural research gap of heart and lung disorders in southeastern US through longitudinal assessment. So it is a prospective study on different aspects of their health, especially heart and lung function. The data that they are collecting are on anthropometry, different clinical measures of heart, lung, and blood vessel health. They do collect biological samples, and they are storing them in a biobank, blood and urine, and they conduct surveys. They also have Fitbit data. They do annual telephone interviews to get information about health outcomes that may have happened recently. And there's linkage to the participants' medical records. And this is funded by, this is funded by the NHLBI, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. As of March 25th, today, 3,299 mobile exam unit exams have been completed. So they've got a good sample size already. And they're getting lots of applications for manuscript proposals and as well as ancillary studies. And we have the PI right here. It's very exciting. Okay, as for myself, these are a couple of my students. Stacy Conkle graduated a few years ago and is now working for ATSDR. At least I hope she still has her job. I should probably get in touch with her. Toshura is an assistant professor here in the department, the one that works with infectious diseases now. And this obviously is a future epidemiologist, my 7-year-old. But I research the effects of environmental and genetic exposures on reproductive outcomes, and I've also worked on other health outcomes like obesity, kidney disease. In my experience, I have conducted prospective and cross-sectional studies, and the exposures that I've looked at are PCBs, PBBs, tear gas during the protests, secondhand smoke, genes. I've done a lot of GWAS, which is now, out of style, but I still remember a few things. Genetic risk scores and gene-environment interactions. My first love was genetics. I had an awesome genetics professor in college, so I have retained that love throughout my career. The outcomes that I've looked at are reproductively related, like agent monarchy, menstrual function as an indicator of endocrine health, fecundability, fertility, reproductive hormone levels, adverse birth outcomes like miscarriage and stillbirth, polycystic ovary syndrome, male reproductive outcomes, and then sort of body metrics like BMI and waist to hip ratio. Dr. Brian Gwynn is our resident lead expert. He studies associations between lead and human health and behavior. For his dissertation, he actually went around Louisville collecting lead samples from topsoil and used GIS to correlate that with different other characteristics by neighborhood. And he's very into health policy, and he's actually worked to create legislation to reduce lead exposure in Louisville. And he's also an amazing teacher, in case you didn't know. We in the Department of Epidemiology have collaborated with large cohort studies, so we have connections with these studies that we will be happy to, help facilitate if anyone else would like to work with these studies. So there's the REGARD study, which is a national cohort study. The main outcome that they look at is stroke, but they measure all kinds of different health outcomes, including cardiovascular disease and cancer. So they have a lot of participants, over 30,000 Black and white participants, and it's fairly recent. The participants were enrolled between 2003 and 2007. A couple of us have worked with the Jackson Heart Study, which is a cohort study of cardiovascular disease, specifically among African Americans. Dr. Dupre has worked with the Nurses Health Study. A couple of us have worked with the Women's Health Initiative, the Breast Cancer Health Disparity Study, and the Four Corners Cancer Study. Okay, on to the Department of Health Management and System Sciences. So they focus on big data analytics and data mining. They do have, for example, something useful that they can do. They have in-house algorithms to convert ICD-10 codes to indicator values in analytical data sets. It's a skill that they've developed. They do have the Cerner data set, which has 180 million patients. However, that does require training in relational databases. It includes data from 2000 to 2019, including lab data. They have experience working with NHANES data and also the HCUP data, which is inpatient and outpatient hospitalization data through 2020. The CIK, the Commonwealth Institute of Kentucky. We also have some faculty here in the school that are part of the CIK, and you can apply to be a CIK scholar. So these are different different databases that the CIK has access to. The AHA annual survey, the BRFSS, that's the behavioral risk factor surveillance system. Again, the HCUP data set, which is very handy. Kentucky Health Facility and Services data set, the Kentucky Health Issues Poll, and the National Survey of Children's Health. This is not a complete list, but the data briefs can be found here for anyone who's interested in possibly working with this data. And you can contact Syed Karimi or me for more information. Okay, now we have the Department of Health Promotion and Behavioral Sciences. The research methods that they typically employ in their department include things like qualitative research, mixed methods, community-based participatory research, thematic analysis. And their areas of expertise are social equity, structural violence, the impact of health policies on marginalized populations, the structural determinants of health, health-related decision-making, and HPV-associated cancers and cervical cancer screening. Okay, I guess that is all. I'm happy to take any questions.